Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on your panel, we've got Ayush Nuatia, and I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. So, Ayush, you're kind of our expert guest or expert host, or however you want to swing that cat. And yeah, we're talking about Bridgetown. Now, we lined this up before you were a host on the show because we were talking about the codecs, the Rails and Hotwire codecs, and then it came up that you were on the Bridgetown core team, and I was like, well, cool, because I've been wanting to talk about it. So
yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to be on the other side of the metaphorical table, back
right,
as a guest rather than a host. But yeah, let's chat Bridgetown. So
yeah.
so where do you want to start?
Well, we have a grand tradition on this show of starting with a definition. So why don't you tell us what Bridgetown is?
Right. So Bridgetown is what we call a progressive site generator. So, hey, Valentino.
Hey there.
Yeah, we just got started.
Yeah,
awesome.
Mm-hmm. So let me read out the tagline from the website. We call it a next generation progressive site generator and full stack framework powered by Ruby, which is a mouthful. So what the hell does that actually mean? Yeah. Well, it's kind of like a successor to Jekyll. It was forked from Jekyll 4.2, but it's kind of turned into something that's a lot more than just that. So it's still like primarily a static site generator. Like I would say all the features and everything are geared towards, like, I would say 90% of it is geared towards just building static sites. And we've refactored quite a lot from Jekyll. So obviously the whole world of static site generation kind of evolved quite a bit from when Jekyll first arrived on the scene. And there are a lot of quirks under the hood where, things like a collection of posts in Jekyll is kind of like a custom collection, but not really. It's slightly different in different ways. And then, there's like a whole, it was just under the hood, very messy in certain ways. So we kind of refactored the entire generation engine. So the way, like the content is either read off disk or like acquired from some other source and then built into this site, and then the site is written, the actual website with HTML pages is written to disk for you to do as you want. So, well, I say we rewrote it. Jared, the chap who started the project, he rewrote this whole thing. And then a common use case is also like, you have like 95% of static site, and then suddenly you need one tiny bit of dynamic functionality. Like, let's say you have a marketing website and you want to put a contact us form on it, and you need some way for that form to, like, an endpoint for that to submit to, which sends an email to yourself or something like that. So we used a framework called Rhoda, which is like, it's kind of like a toolkit to build a framework rather than a fully formed framework in its own right. And we kind of plugged that into Bridgetown, and now you have the ability to write a few dynamic endpoints in addition to your static site. So we kind of cater to this whole use case where you kind of, most of your content is static, but you need a little bit of dynamic functionality, and we'll provide that to you in the context of like a Ruby full stack framework. You don't need to go reaching for Lambda functions and all that stuff, because that kind of goes against our philosophy of like everything should live in the single repo and everything should be runnable locally.
Yeah, we've had Jeremy Evans on to talk about Rhoda, and I remember back in the day when Jekyll came out. I mean, the use case that everybody used was a blog, right? And so you were talking about how you have this collection of posts, and it kind of, does magical things for your posts. And yeah, I mean, that was very much how it was used. That's what Tom wrote it for, was so that he could run his blog on it. And so, yeah, it made sense, but yeah, the I guess those limitations are the things that kind of kept me from like fully adopting it. So, you look at something like top end devs, right? Um, because I've used static site generators to run top end or devchat.tv top end devs, right? And then I've moved it back to a Rails app, I think 3 times now. Um, and so you're right, we're now on the third time. And the reason is because I have other dynamic stuff I want to pull into it.
Yeah.
And um the other end of it is if I have a Rails app and I want a blog or something like that that Bridgetown does well, then that's the hiccup on the other end is, okay, how do I integrate the two so that every time I change, say, the layout on one, I don't have to change it on the other, because I may want it to live under topenddevs.com/blog as opposed to having blog.topenddevs.com, right? So I can get the SEO and the other benefits of having
Yeah.
it part of the website. So those are kinds of the things that I've been looking at with it. But I have to say a couple of the things that I do really like about it are that it seems to have a lot more options, and it seems a lot more friendly to front end manipulation, right? So if I want to bring in a hot wire and wire things in, that's not terribly hard. Jekyll, you kind of had to play with it a little bit, I guess, to make it really nicely do that. And then, yeah, I didn't realize that you had kind of the dynamic aspect of it with Rhoda. So, yeah, I mean, let's say that I want to give this another look, right? Because
Yeah.
you've kind of gotten my interest here. Um, like, where do I start, and how do I make it do what I want without having it be a giant pain in my rear end? Because I don't want
Uh,
to maintain two systems.
yeah, of course. So a lot of the dynamic stuff is still like early days, so there will be
Hmm.
like teething trouble. It's not going to be as smooth as Rails. It's just such a mature framework.
Right.
But honestly, the best way to get started is just gem install Bridgetown. Bridgetown new my site.
Hmm.
Honestly, the best way to do it is just get your hands dirty, and you'll see a directory structure out there that'll instantly look familiar for anyone from the Jekyll world. There'll be like endpoints for server side stuff and all that kind of created for you. And the docs are really good. Like one of the things that attracted me to the Bridgetown project early on before I was even on the core team was that the docs were so good. And I think I first stumbled upon the project when I was like literally 2 or 3 months old, and I didn't realize how new it was. Looking at the docs, I thought this is like years old.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're very proud of the quality of the documentation. So yeah, just create a site, uh, go to bridgetownrb.com, check out our docs. You should find whatever you need out there. And just to take the point that you said earlier on about like Bridgetown being a bit more friendly towards the front end stuff, that was actually, I think, when the framework was first launched, I think the tagline was something about it being like a Webpack aware static site generator
Hmm.
or something. And yeah, so that was always a core thing for us, was like we needed something on the front end that was built in, that because no one wants to wrangle Webpack and ES build. I mean, I blame half my gray hairs to just having to use Webpack and Webpacker. But we've got a pretty good setup
Yeah.
right out of the box. So if you need to install, like, we've got a good ES build setup now. We're deprecating Webpack. But yeah, if you need to install anything on the front end, we've got like npm and ES build and all that just already set up for you, so you don't have to deal with any of that.
Right. Valentino, have you used Bridgetown?
I haven't. The last time I did a static site within Ruby, it was with Middleman,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
the Middleman gem. I'm curious because it has a lot of similarities to Middleman. Um, and I'm curious, like, maybe if you're aware of Middleman, maybe how like you can dissuade some of the older like Ruby heads like us, right? Like, hey, what does it
um,
bring that Middletown, or Middleman, like, kind of it's where it strays away, and maybe some of the highlights from it.
so I'm aware of Middleman. I'm aware of its existence. I've probably browsed its website once a couple of years ago, but I couldn't give you a good critique because I just don't know middleman well enough. So I can talk to the strengths of Bridgetown, but I couldn't compare it to middleman because I've never used it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah, I mean the deployments aspect of it, it's very much like a build local, and then deploy static. Whereas it seems Bridgetown is much more built up around, having that dynamic key aspect of it, like
yeah,
being able to augment it, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, if you wanted to use it purely as a static site generator, you still can. In fact, all my Bridgetown websites are purely static. I don't think I've got dynamic functionality on any of them because I haven't needed it. So with Bridgetown, we like to promote render.com as a preferred host just because I really like it. And yeah, it's just, once you set it up, what render will do, it'll trigger a build every time you do a git push, which is pretty normal, and then it'll just run a Bridgetown build or Bridgetown deploy rather, which will generate the site and write it to disk, and then you just take your output folder and deploy that to a CDN. So you don't really need to do a whole lot. It's and we have something a feature of Bridgetown called like bundled configuration. So that's kind of like workflows or recipes or whatever that you can run to configure certain things. And what we have one for render.com. So when you run that, it'll create a render.yaml file, which is like infrastructure as code. So then literally all you need to do is link your repository to render and point it to that file, and that's it. And you have a website up and running.
Gotcha. Yeah, this this looks a lot more feature rich than Middleman does. Again, like we keep saying, like focusing on the front end aspects of it. Seems like you could build like maybe some JavaScript apps potentially.
Yeah, you can. Nothing's stopping you from doing any of that. It's I mean, Ruby is always going to be front and center. So we have features like you can write components, which are just Ruby classes, which is built right. And we have like a concept of Bridgetown components. So you don't need to pull in like a third party thing for that. It's just there. So Ruby will always be front and center. And it's quite easy to also do quite advanced things like you can hook into the build process and start doing like dynamic stuff at build time. So one of my websites, which is f/42.com, which is like a photo gallery. So if you want to look at it, it's slash42.com. It's a photo gallery with like a lot of my photography on there. And all I need to do is really copy paste photo files into the repository and run the build. And then I have Ruby code that reads the photos off disk, extracts EXIF information, things like shutter speed and all that stuff, extracts it from the file, writes it to a YAML file, and dynamically adds HTML pages to the build. And then when the build concludes, it just writes those HTML pages out. So for each album or each photograph, I'm not creating those pages manually. That's just all done by Ruby codes. All I need to do is copy the photos in place and run the build. So that's pretty advanced-ish Ruby code that I've just hooked into the build process.
So I'm imagining something similar with like a JSON file or something. If you just have a, kind of a, how do I put it, a static or it doesn't change very often. So I'm comfortable committing the data to the repo.
Yeah.
You can do the same kind of thing, right? It's the same idea as the markdown with Jekyll, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I have another blog post. I just commit more data.
Yeah. Exactly. The difference here is just that I'm just copying photo files into place, and then there's Ruby code that's reading and doing some stuff with those photo files. Because there's obviously nothing built in to handle JPEGs.
Right.
Handle JPEGs in the way that I want them handled. You can obviously just paste them in and reference them in your HTML.
Right. So you've got some kind of renderer or data extractor that you've just added the code.
Yeah, a data extractor basically, and then a dynamic way to add pages to the build, because I don't want to manually create a new markdown or .html file for each and every photograph. I've just got some code in there that generates those pages for me at build time and adds them into I think it's a site.pages collection. And then when the site is output, it'll just render out all those pages.
That's cool.
This is really cool.
Yeah, because like we unified the concept of like collections from like I said earlier, Jekyll kind of treated different types of collections slightly differently. Like posts was treated slightly differently to a custom collection and stuff. We kind of unified all that, and now we have built-in collections like pages and data and posts. Those are built in. You get them out of the box for free, but they behave in the exact same way as a custom collection would behave. So that just makes doing advanced things like this, like when you're manipulating the build, it just makes it a whole lot easier.
That makes sense. So in essence, kind of how do I put it? The blog, that we typically see for sites like this, things like this, right? That it just does that natively, naturally. How far can you push it? So what I'm imagining is, okay, so I have a different kind of entity. I mean, you've talked about, images, so I can write my own plugin for it that does the image thing. Can I build like to take payments on it, or to restrict access to content, to members, or because I'm imagining, okay, how far do I push this that might be easier than writing a fully blown Rails app?
Yeah, you can push it as far as you want. If you want to do payments and stuff, that's what the Rhoda thing is there for. That's where you can write all that. I think a couple of years ago we'd run like a virtual Bridgetown conf, I think at the end of 2022, and I'd given a demo as part of my talk, and I think the demo was a simple photo gallery where you can buy photos. I hadn't actually integrated Stripe or anything. I just kind of faked the payment stuff, but the demo was basically that you have this static thing which lets you view the photo gallery, and then you have this little dynamic buy button where you can buy the photo. And obviously I just fake the backend stuff, but I demonstrated how it can be done. So yeah, absolutely. With regard to paywalling content, of course you can do that as well. So actually, Jared, who's started the Bridgetown project and still runs it to a large degree, just released a CSS course that is fully built on Bridgetown. If I could actually find the link to that would be quite useful. But yeah, essentially it's all just a Bridgetown app, and it's a subscription service. So he's built like payments, and he's obviously paywalled his articles because it's a subscription course, and that's all done using Bridgetown. So yeah, you can push it as far as you want. It just depends on how far do you want to push it until you start wishing you had Rails. But you can still you can still plug Rails in, because Rhoda is rack compliant, so you can plug in, you can mount Rails as an app within it.
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions here.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I mean, I think of like typically like we have like some core tenants when we're thinking about like static sites, right? Like where we have like, SEO is probably like the number one like thing that people start thinking about when they just want to get like some static marketing page up, right? And the I guess the next one would be like, the caching layer, like what is provided like to just like make sure that all of the files are like gzip compressed or whatever and optimized for like the server layer to be able to, are there like plugins and stuff for this kind of stuff? Is this come out of the box? Like, what I guess optimizations are built in that like gives you that peace of mind, like, oh yeah, I should use Bridgetown and I don't have to worry about all this stuff.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. So actually we don't build any other stuff into the framework, because like again, 95% of it is aimed at static files, and the way to host them is just dump them on a CDN. So if you have static HTML files on a CDN, any decent CDN will automatically gzip your files and cache them properly before sending them down anyway. And then like with render.com, which is my preferred host, you can set caching headers and stuff manually using the YAML infrastructure as code thingy. So yeah, we don't handle that in the framework. The dynamic stuff again is very much a kind of like a bolt-on, so we don't have anything built in for that. But yeah, it's a tool you reach for when most of your content is static, and you don't have to worry about that if you're hosting it on a CDN. So yeah, we don't do it in the framework.
Well, I'm just going to throw into that a lot of the SEO stuff. I mean, some of it's just your content, right? But some of it is also like meta tags in your HTML and things like that. And so you're going to see a lot more of that in your layouts and themes as opposed to from the framework itself, right?
Yeah, we do have a Bridgetown SEO plugin which generates a bunch of those meta tags for you. So that's one of the plugins I kind of reach for when I'm starting a new site. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's a first-party plugin, so it's let me just double check that. So that like then Bridgetown SEO tag. It's a first-party plugin. It's under the Bridgetown organization on GitHub, and yeah, then you just like drop in an ERB tag or a liquid tag in your layout, and it'll pull stuff out from configurations. I mean, it's all in the README, and it'll just generate those meta tags for you.
Awesome. Problem solved.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, and another huge advantage of Bridgetown over Jekyll is you can use ERB. Jekyll is liquid only, and I loathe the liquid. I mean, it's great when when your users are writing templates because you can't give users the ability to execute Ruby on your app. But if you're writing your own templates, then ERB all the way. And and we're still currently Bridgetown is still defaulting to Liquid, but in Bridgetown 2.0 we're going to switch the default to ERB. Liquid will still be there as an option, but the default will be ERB because that's, I just think, is the way forward.
Yeah, I always despise GitHub pages because of the templating. And honestly, all of the cruft that comes with Jekyll, which I do see, like you provide easy deployment to our configuration with GitHub Pages, which is really fun.
Yeah, we do it. It's a pain to kind of maintain. That keeps breaking, and I die a little bit inside every time someone in the Bridgetown Discord asks, "How can I get this working on GitHub Pages?" I'm like, really? Like, I mean, render.com, it's free. It's the exact same thing. It's free, but it actually works.
Right.
So how does render.com work? I mean, we don't have to dive in too much of this, but like I was always under the assumption that they like there's like kind of the upcharge for like location observability, like not observability, but location, like where you want to deploy it to, like fly.o style.
No, render's just your standard platform as a service. It's kind of like Heroku, but living in 2024, not 2014. And for them, yeah, shots fired.
Right.
It's just a platform as a service, and they offer static sites for free. So instead of like on Heroku, you kind of think of each thing as a site. On render.com, you think in the within a concept of services. So like, let's say a Rails application, you would have a web service, which is a Rails app. You'd have a database service, you'd have a background job service, and you'd have a Redis service. So you'd have 4 services on render.com, which comprise one application or one site. But for a static site, you just need one static site service, and you link it to your GitHub repository, and it'll do the build and deploy for you every time you do a Git push. Obviously, things get a bit more complicated when you want to do dynamic stuff, because then you'll need a second service that that handles the dynamic things. So essentially what you'd have is one instance of your application running statically and another instance of your application running dynamically, and then you just like punch holes through one to kind of call the other when needed. So like through your static site, you've probably host your dynamic thing at like API api.example.com, and then your static side just calls out to api.example.com for the dynamic stuff.
That
So
makes sense.
that's how render works. Their model just kind of fits my brain really well. Just the concept
Mhm.
of services. I just like how that kind of is conceptualized because I just understand it quite well.
Right. One thing that I'm wondering about with the deployment story on this is, going back to the example that I used before, right? Where it's, hey, look, I'd like to have a blog on topenddevs.com, right? topenddevs.com/blog. And I don't necessarily want to have to manage all of the different fields and have my database and do the thing. Plus, statically rendered files tend to, they load faster. There are a lot of good reasons to do it that way. Is there a way to deploy it up underneath a Rails app? And do you typically just add it to your Rails repo in some way and have it build into a folder? Or do you deploy it separately and then use, I don't know, Nginx or something to say, and this folder loads this other thing?
All those are valid approaches. For me personally, I'd probably keep it in a separate repo and either have Nginx to kind of take care of the routing, or uh, I would just bite the bullet and host on a subdomain just because I'm lazy that way. So,
Yeah.
like for example, my app scattergun.email is a Rails app, but the product blog is at blog.scattergun.email, and that's a Bridgetown app. um I mean, I could have hosted on like /blog and then done some funky stuff with redirects or URL rewrites to kind of make that work, but and it just seemed cleaner. So I do lose some of the SEO benefits, sure, but it's just cleaner that way. So that's how I would do that. Whether you'd want to mix it up with your Rails repo, probably not, depending on
Hmm.
how your use cases actually is set up. I mean, you could. I know that Jared has done it with Jekyll in the past, where he's kind of had Rails and Jekyll sitting side by side. I mean, there's nothing stopping you
Yeah.
from doing that. There's no technical reason why you shouldn't. I probably just wouldn't because it's against just my sensibilities to a point where it's a personal thing. There's no technical reason not. It's just a personal thing. I don't want to be mixing those two.
No, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I was doing research for this, and it made me think of High Voltage from Thoughtbot, which I guess it's in maintenance mode,
Mm.
which is kind of a bummer. But maybe there's opportunity here for Bridgetown plugin for Rails.
Yeah, we were working on something, but then Jared kind of lost interest in it. It's probably not going to happen because his. So the thing is, it's like Bridgetown is like, I would say 80 to 90% Jared White,
Uh-huh.
probably 8% me, and then 2% other contributors.
Right.
So it's still very much his show. I'm quite happy to just support him in any way he needs, which also, and because it's all volunteer stuff, it does mean that the things that him and I are interested in are the things that get done.
Hmm.
And his interest in Rails is dwindling pretty significantly. And I don't have a massive interest in integrating Rails with Bridgetown. So if we have contributors who want to come in and help us out with it, we'd be more than happy. But I don't think it's something that's on either of our radars
Right.
at this point. But that said, one of the legacy bits we're kind of carrying from Jekyll is the fact that the web server was kind of hard coded into the tool itself. So Jekyll, because Jekyll only used a web server for development. So they had hard coded WebBrick in there as part of literally built within Jekyll.
Oh, that takes me back.
Yeah. In as part of Bridgetown 1.0, Jared ripped out Jekyll and put Puma in
Right.
because we needed Puma for Rhoda. But now we were in a position where Puma's kind of built into Bridgetown, and I wasn't particularly happy with that. So I've taken some steps to make Bridgetown just generic rack compliant. So we
Right.
want to be at a point where you can or you can bring any rack compliant web server you want and bolt it onto Bridgetown. We'll obviously still supply Puma as a default, but once we get to that point, Bridgetown will be like any other rack app. So you could just put it in alongside your Rails repo or whatever,
It runs
and
as an engine.
just mount it as an engine in your roots.rb in Rails. So there is a path to that. It's just yeah, we'll get there soon enough.
Yeah, I found a few posts as well when I looked at this last that we're using a gem called Rails Reverse Proxy. And effectively what it does is it takes the request to Rails app /blog /whatever, and it just knows that that has to get passed off to your Bridgetown instance or Jekyll or Hugo or whatever you're running in the that's running somewhere else, but it'll just hand it off and then return the response.
Yeah.
But the downside to that is that then if your layout on your main page changes and you want it to look the same, you have to make the change in both places.
2 places, yeah, exactly. So that's always going to be a tricky thing if you're handling 2 separate repositories. So it comes down to whether you want to run it as 2 different projects or you want to run it as a single project. Because I think if you're trying to run it as a single project and using 2 different tools, that's probably going to get gnarly at some point or the other. So going back to my scattergun example, the scattergun blog, which is Bridgetown powered, and the app itself, which is Rails powered, I treat them as independent products. So the blog has the same color scheme and fonts and design language as the app, but it doesn't share any of the layouts or design or anything like that. So it's just it's got a similar look and feel, but it doesn't share any components or code or anything like that. And that was intentional, just because I wanted to run them, because I wanted to avoid that exact problem, that I make a change in one place and then I'll have to make a change in another repository. I didn't want to do that.
Right. So one thing that I'm going to whine about here for a minute is lately I've gotten very much into Tailwind, and I really like it. I paid for Tailwind UI, so I used a lot of the stuff that's in there. But one thing that I found with podcast show notes is that if I type them into the Tricks editor or something, when it renders it out, it doesn't add the Tailwind classes to the paragraph tags or the header tags or whatever, right? And that's something that I would like to be able to do. And so what I find myself doing is effectively finding ways to add those styles in some other way under the .tricks content class, right? And so Tricks content class H1 looks a lot like an H1 out of Tailwind, right? But I have to go and I have to kind of hand code that myself, and that's been a huge pain. So does Bridgetown give you ways of doing that when you render stuff out? As far as I get the whole wrapper around things, and the layout is going to have all that stuff, and I have that in Rails. But from my Markdown or wherever I'm pulling the content from, can I tell it to build it out that way?
Short answer is no, because unless you're hand coding HTML and putting the classes in, which would be it's like writing HTML. We don't provide any way to do that in Markdown, because we just use Cramdown as a renderer. So I think whatever way you can add custom classes to a Cramdown file, you'd be able to do it that way. We don't have anything specific in Bridgetown for that. And I doubt there will ever be, because Jared and I are both vocal opponents of the whole Tailwind approach with utility first CSS and things like that. So I wouldn't hold my breath on that. It's unlikely to happen. I think that is one thing that I don't want to say never, but I think even if someone proposed some functionality to make that happen, I think Jared and I both would just put a stop to it. And sorry, this is not happening in Bridgetown. I don't want to put words in his mouth either, but that is just one thing where I think we would probably draw a line and say that, because I think I just don't think it's a good approach for web development, and I get why people like it, and I don't want to dissuade people from using it. It's a very just for me personally, I think you should give CSS the respect it deserves. And I like the concept of separating styling from content. So everything in Bridgetown will always kind of be in the spirit of the open web, which is you write your content, which is in HTML, you style it using CSS, and you add dynamic functionality on top of that using JavaScript. So that'll always be like a core tenet of Bridgetown. And mixing up your CSS and HTML, to me, in my opinion, goes against the spirit of the open web.
So you don't want to be my friend anymore. I got it. No, it's okay. It's
yeah, I got that.
no. I understand what you're saying, and I can only imagine what a headache it would be to try and make something like that work. But
yeah, I mean, there's always ways around it, right? Like,
oh yeah,
but I think again, if you're wrestling against the tool, you're probably, in my opinion, not
may not
doing
be the right tool.
not doing something right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think one workaround in Bridgetown might be to, because like I said earlier, we have the concept of Bridgetown components, which are just Ruby classes. So you could just use those to define your styles in there. So you could just have a method which returns all the Tailwind style classes that you need, and then just call that in the HTML template. So that would be one way of going about it within Bridgetown, within the tools that are provided, and I think using them in the spirit that they are meant to be used.
Valentino, you said you had a lot of questions, so and then I keep jumping in with mine. So go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on theming because, like, I feel like next to like SEO, maybe theming is like the next frontier.
Yeah, it's a bit sad at how few community created themes there are out there for Bridgetown. It's something we've tried to push a number of times for the community to create a few more themes, but it hasn't been something that's materialized. I mean, there's a few out there. I think there might be a GitHub tag, Bridgetown themes or something like that. I think there might be something on the Bridgetown website as well. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame that there's not more out there. We have an API for themes. We have a guide on how to create them as well. It's just, I think the tool is not popular enough to have a wider variety of themes. So yeah, if you're listening and you want to use Bridgetown and you like it, please create more themes.
So what is that process like? I'm curious. Like, I see like there's you basically create a new plugin, but like what happens after that?
Yeah, it's just so we have a plugin generator. You generate your plugin, you read the docs, follow the instructions on how to create a theme. You publish it to GitHub, and I think you add a tag to it. I think I can't remember what the tag is. I think it's either just Bridgetown-plugin or Bridgetown-theme or something like that, and it'll show up on our website. Yeah, there's not a massive process to it. You just publish it on GitHub, and then anyone can use it. It's the same as publishing a Ruby gem. So yeah, you'd have to create a gem and push it to Ruby gems as well. But yeah, it's literally just like creating a gem.
Gotcha. And is that like a you pick your CSS or like JavaScript, like all the asset bundling, like that's the responsibility of the plugin kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is there like because what I would love is like, something like Bootstrap or something like that. That I can just like apply to the.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty sure you can configure Bootstrap using the thing I mentioned earlier, bundled configurations.
Yep.
So let me check. Do we have Bootstrap? No, we don't have Bootstrap, but we could. Yeah, that's an easy enough one to add. You can configure things like shoelace, open props, things like that with just running one command. I'm surprised we don't have Bulma in there, actually. That's something we should probably add. So yeah, Bulma is my favorite CSS framework if I was going to use one, which is in fact actually very rarely that I actually even use a framework. But yeah, I mean, these things can be installed quite easily because you have npm there. So you can install them, and they'll be there in your build for you to use, just a couple of in a couple of commands. So even if you don't have it, like even if though there are no like community created themes, there are a few, but not a lot. Stuff like Bootstrap and Bulma you can configure very easily, and then you have all that power at your fingertips.
Yeah, I do see that in that front end bundling section here now. You could just yarn add the framework of your choice and include it in the styles. Yeah, that's cool. Where do you take it from here? I mean, it looks pretty feature complete. Like,
yeah, we have a few Road to Bridgetown 2.0 blog posts that have been published. So if you check out the Bridgetown blog, you'll see some of the things we're working on. So one of the things for me is getting Bridgetown to be rack compliant, so we're not relying on a specific server. Jared is working on like speeding up how the hot reload works in development. So right now we kind of rebuild the entire website every time you make a change, which for bigger sites is not very efficient. So he's working on something that does like incremental builds, so your hot reload when you're developing is super snappy. Got a whole bunch of other stuff, like small improvements as well. I think the big one is we're aiming to drop our dependency on active support. It probably won't happen for Bridgetown 2.0, but long term we want to drop our dependency on active support.
Is there a reason for that?
Jared's written out a long blog post about it. For him, the reasons were largely personal. So, but my view on it is, I think there's a lot of scope for different ideas in the Ruby community. We've kind of gone too close to Rails with Bridgetown a number of times. I think with the use of things like active support and stuff like that, I think we were just trying to just fly very close to Rails. But I think it's good to have different ideas around the Ruby community. So we're just trying to see what else we can come up with that doesn't have a hard dependency on Rails frameworks, and just try to have a few different trains of thoughts, different solutions to problems. See where that takes us, really. Yeah, but the reason for dropping active support was a largely personal thing by Jared because of his disillusionment with Rails and with 37 signals. So yeah, and like I said, he's 90% of Bridgetown, so there's no point in going in a direction that he wasn't happy with or felt motivated to work on, because it's still largely a volunteer driven thing. He doesn't get paid for it. We have a small number of GitHub sponsors, but it's very much a labor of love. So I'm quite happy to support him with whatever direction he wants to take the project in.
So one thing that I'm wondering about with some of these static sites, they do a great job on a bunch of stuff. But one of them is search, right? So if you have a large amount of stuff in your website, people are going to want to find it. So do you recommend something like Algolia or some of these engines out there that kind of hook into your site? Or do you push people more toward, hey, here's a really simple way to do it with the Rhoda implementation that you have, and where do people end up for that?
So yeah, we recommend like a JavaScript approach. Now, I think Algolia is one of the. We have search on the Bridgetown website, which is a Bridgetown powered website, and it's not it's not a server side. It's not a server powered search. It's client only. I am just trying to see where.
Yeah, but if you use Algolia, you're using their backend to do the search, right? So.
Bridgetown. It's using the Bridgetown quick search plugin, which runs lunr.js. So it's not Algolia. That's I was probably just confusing myself. So this is purely client side. So I think it builds like a JSON document or something.
Okay, so it builds its own index and hosts that statically.
Exactly. It's a purely JavaScript powered search. So lunr.js is the solution we're using. So yeah, that's and the plugin is called Bridgetown Quick Search. It's another first-party plugin. So yeah, that's what we recommend for search. But if you wanted something a bit more involved, then again, you can always just reach out for the service, like any server-side solution.
Yeah, I always like Lunar.
Yeah.
I'd never
I
heard of
did
it before.
try. There's actually quite a few JavaScript search client side search now, which work really well. That are very much like, I think there's one like that's like an Elasticsearch clone even,
Okay. Wow.
and they're really easy to use, and it's pretty wild like how fast they are.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So besides kind of the cleanup on like active support and getting rack support in there, are there other things that are coming to Bridgetown or?
Nothing big. We're pretty much like, we want to keep Bridgetown core fairly slim, so we don't want to be putting stuff in just for the heck of it. I think a lot of the big features and stuff will be largely plugins. So I think Jared had an idea where he wanted to have like really good first party support for Flex. Do you know the library Flex? PHLEX by Joel Draper. It's a way to write components using HTML. It's a way to write object-oriented HTML using pure Ruby. I think. I mean, I've got that completely wrong. It's something to do with writing. It's like a DSL to write HTML using Ruby. And
It's like if Vue components had a DSL.
okay, yeah. What Valentino said.
I found it on the internet. It looks cool.
Yeah. So initially, I think he proposed adding that to core, but then I said something like that should live in a plugin. So yes, there will probably at some point be a plugin, or there might already be one that I'm not aware of because Flex isn't really for me. But yes, things like that will always live in plugins. There'll be first-party plugins under the Bridgetown organization on GitHub. So, and we'll have good support for them out of the box. But we're not looking to add a whole lot into Bridgetown core. It's going to be largely incremental changes, and just getting it to a stable place. Because we don't want uh, we don't want to start making Bridgetown too complex because it does quite a lot, and just judging by the vibe at the large Bridgetown conf, people are just getting a bit daunted by it already.
Right.
So we definitely like, our philosophy is very much the simple stuff will always be simple. So we may have all the advanced like server-side rendering and all in there for you to use, but if you want something as simple as just a blog, that'll always still be very simple to do. We're not going to stand in your way in any way, shape, or form. But obviously, when you have a lot of advanced features, people inevitably tend to get distracted by those. So I can't think of anything that's like a big feature that we have coming through the pipeline. It's all just going to be like incremental stuff for the foreseeable anyway, unless someone has a really solid proposal that that we the core team like, and like, okay, yeah, then we can go ahead with that. But for now, there's nothing that I'm aware of other than let's just keep cleaning this up and keep stabilizing it.
Right. All right, so the $1 million question here is, can we use AI to, generate static pages for us and build content generation? How easy, right? Would that to be? Yeah, to just have a bot, right? Like if there's a Bridgetown GPT, right? Can I use it to just quickly spin up ideas?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, there's nothing stopping it. It's just writing Ruby code. You can do. You've got the whole power of Ruby at your disposal, so you can do whatever the hell you want.
All right, Bridgetown plugin coming. Bridgetown AI.
Right. I'm kind of curious. What's your story with this? How did you wind up working on this project?
Yeah, good question. So I think it was quite early on in my time with Ruby. So for listeners who aren't familiar, I only started working with Ruby in 2020. I used to be a mobile developer before that, and I spent the first half of the pandemic pretty much learning Ruby and Rails.
We're glad you saw the light.
Sorry?
We're glad you saw the light.
Yeah, I'm glad too. And I think I was at some point I was doing something with Jekyll. I can't remember what it was now, and I was trying to integrate Webpack with it, and I was losing the will to live because integrating Webpack with Jekyll is not for the faint-hearted. And while I was just googling around, I think I found because at the time Bridgetown was marketed as like a Ruby powered Webpack aware static site generator.
Mhm.
And I just stumbled upon this thing and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Here's another tool that thinks it's better than Jekyll. And I was very unimpressed just because of my skeptical, pessimistic nature. But it kind of stuck in my brain. And then a few days later, I got so fed up. I was like, let me go give this thing an actual try. And I just installed Bridgetown. And that's when I realized it's actually a fork of Jekyll. So when I installed it and created a site, everything was super familiar. And to get my old Jekyll site to work, all I needed to do was copy the files over, and that was it, because it was just a fork and the directory structure was so similar. I could get up and running with Bridgetown super fast, and I was like, well, okay, this is pretty cool. And I just started customizing it in ways that I wanted. So I think, yeah, when I first used it, it had Sass by default, but I was getting into post CSS at the time, and I was reluctant to use a full blown preprocessor, because even at the time I could see how good vanilla CSS was becoming, and I liked the whole concept of post CSS, where it just kind of lets you write next generation CSS today, kind of like a Babel kind of thing. So Bridgetown had no support for post CSS. I customized my template to kind of add it in there. I made a few other changes just out of personal preference, and I wrote a blog post saying, oh, I really love this new tool, Bridgetown. There's some things out of the box I didn't like, so here are all the things I made, like I made to change it to my liking. And I shared that around the Bridgetown community. I think at the time they had a discourse and a Discord, and so I just shared it around there. And I got a reply from Jared saying, if you wanted to make a pull request for any of these things, we'd be happy to accept it. So I pull request some of the stuff back, like I think post CSS and stuff. I can't remember now, but I made 3 or 4 pull requests back into the repo from customizations I'd made just for myself. And I just kind of got involved with issues. So I was commenting on issues, commenting on pull requests, giving my opinion, just getting involved with the community. And then I got a message from Jared one day, and I should mention, I mentioned him a few times already. Jared White is the person who started Bridgetown back in April 2020. He forked it from Jekyll because of his own frustrations with Jekyll and its kind of lack of progress. And it was basically him and another guy, Connor Rogers, who's quite well known in like front end circles, who were on the core team when I joined. And yeah, I just got a message out of the blue from Jared saying, I really like your contributions. Would you consider joining the core team? And I was like, hell yeah, why not? So yeah, that's how I ended up on the core team. My contributions have been largely selfish, I think. Apart from maybe 1 or 2 things, I think literally everything I've contributed has been stuff I wanted for myself. Um, which is one way of getting involved in open source. But I was also careful that I didn't want to I didn't want to get tired of it. I didn't want to start resenting the project because
Right.
I'm freelance. I don't have a job that has a consistent paycheck coming in. Whatever I do on open source is stuff where I could be billing a client, but I'm not billing a client. I'm doing my own stuff instead. So it needed to be very much something that comes from within. So that's why my contributions tend to go in spurts. Like there'll be a couple of months where I'll make tons of contributions, then I'll go a few months without making any. But behind the scenes, I'm always like supporting Jared and the core team with decisions and things like that. So yeah, my role is a bit weird with the project, in the sense that kind of there but not always there. It's very much a choose your own involvement kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's how I ended up, and that's on the core team, and that's kind of like the role that I play within it at the moment.
I love that too, because yeah, you start contributing and
Yeah, that's the best way to get involved with any project, right? You just start contributing, see where that goes. And actually, another point I should make is my freelance career is what I have is very much, well, slightly indirectly thanks to Bridgetown, because I had no contacts in the Ruby community whatsoever. And I just ended up on the Bridgetown core team in December 2020. And it was around Jan 2021 when I was trying to start freelancing and finding clients and stuff like that. And wasn't really making much of a headway. But there was someone who I had got in contact through my work on Bridgetown was a chap named Mike Rogers, who is sadly no longer with us. But he was also a contributor on Bridgetown, and I'd got in contact with him through my work on the project. And he retweeted someone looking for Ruby and Rails freelancers. And I think he sent that tweet directly to me as well because he knew I was looking for freelance work. And I replied to that message, and that was how I got my first contract, which got me started with Rails freelancing. And it's been like, it's always getting your first client's always the hardest, right? And I was with that client for well over a year. I'm still in touch with them. I'm still like good friends with them. And so I think Bridgetown was instrumental in giving me a freelance career. That's the power of open source.
All right. Well, anything else we want to go into, Valentino?
No, I think we've said it all. I mean, I'd be honest, I didn't know much about Bridgetown before today, and it looks awesome. It solves, it solves a little bit more problems than my original solution of middleman. So I'm excited to try this out in my next static project for sure.
Cool, glad to hear it. Yeah, if you run into trouble, you can always reach out to me for help. And we just want to try and make it as simple as possible to get started with static sites and have the advanced functionality there when you need it. So I don't know a whole lot about middleman, but I can say with a fair amount of certainty that you'd be happier with Bridgetown.
It's funny. There's a lot of similarities in some of the design decisions. I imagine some were pulled, maybe copied, and that's great because why repurpose or why rebuild it from scratch? And it does from my example as a middleman user, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love all of the you can have like data files that allow you to like use some data objects in reference to your templates, and gives you all of the how to host static files, and all that stuff is built in. And
that's actually stuff we just inherited from Jekyll. Actually, that's like those conceptual decisions we just inherited from Jekyll, and they're good decisions, so we just stuck with them. Like, why change it if it ain't broke, right?
Maybe middleman also stole it from Jekyll.
Could be, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like this whole just the whole ecosystem of static site generators, I think Jekyll is what kicked it all off. So I'm not surprised that it's had such a far-reaching effect.
Yeah, I'm curious if middleman is a fork of Jekyll as well. It really wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think it is, but if it was,
I don't think it is either, but it wouldn't shock me if it were.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to push us into the picks. Valentino, why don't you start us off with picks?
Sure. I've got 2 picks today. Last week I was at there was a Ruby AI meetup in New York City that I attended. It was awesome. It was hosted by a company called Sublayer, which, if you're not familiar, is an awesome company, awesome product. Sublayer, they basically give you like some code generation in a Ruby ecosystem, and they provide some awesome tools. I've been experimenting with their blueprints, which basically let you save like code snippets as AI generation like seeds. So if you have like common patterns that you use in all of your applications or your teams, you can get AI to clone those patterns and say, oh, I want a service object, or I want a factory, or all these different patterns that evolve over time. And you can get it to code it in whatever styles that you have. So it's really neat. And just met a ton of great people there. My next pick is from the Olympia chat team. If you're not familiar, Olympia is like a AI robots on steroids. You basically get like a team of assistants that have various purposes. So you can have a copywriter, you can have a marketing strategist, like all these different kinds of very specific assistants. And there's just like so many incredible features in it, and they just keep pumping it out. Like as an example, when I was about to attend the event in New York City, I just said, hey, here's a list of attendees, like tell me who I should like be connecting with, right? Like and it goes and it summarizes all the people, and it's just a fantastic tool if you want to do research, or it even sends emails for you if you want, which is kind of wild. And all of the assistants can talk to each other. I could talk endlessly about it, but I think we'll have Opie on soon, so we can dig in there.
Yeah, next week actually.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. All right, Ayush, what are your picks?
So I've got one pick, which is going to be pretty alien for, I think, most people in America, but it's a thing that's happening in America. The Cricket 2020 World Cup starts on Saturday in the United States and West Indies. And the first match is USA versus Canada in Dallas, Texas. I know cricket's not a thing at all in America, but given that the World Cup's happening there and it's the shortened form of the game, I mean, the traditional form lasts for 5 days and only Muppets like me enjoy that. But this is more like it's a 3.5 hour version, way more fast paced. And I'm aware of the popularity of another sport in America, which involves throwing a hard ball and whacking it with a wooden stick, and then chasing it around. And cricket's basically the same thing. It's also chucking a hard ball, whacking it with a wooden stick, and then chasing it around. So, yeah, I don't know if you're vaguely interested. Cricket World Cup starts on Saturday in America. And the biggest, I think, one of the most valuable sporting events in the world is India versus Pakistan at cricket, and that's happening in New York City. They've built like a temporary stadium in Central Park, which can hold something like kind of 25-30,000 people or something like that. And it's primarily built for the India versus Pakistan match. It's like their flagship match, and they wanted to have that in America. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, that's my pick.
Cool. And by cool, I mean it's cricket, but okay.
Well, I mean, you like baseball out there in America. I mean, cricket's not that different.
I don't follow baseball either, so
Fair enough.
It's funny because this seems to be like a new like recurring thing. Because I know like I was in Nashville and they had like a not the World Cup, but they had like a international soccer event like where they built a
now
temporary
you're speaking my
stadium.
language.
But all the locals, that you talk to, oh, like, do you know what's happening down there? And they're like, oh, some soccer thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's packed. It was just like,
Yeah.
clearly it's just funny.
Yeah, it is. I'd be really curious to know, like, when that India Pakistan match happens in New York. I think it's just going to be largely immigrants from those two countries. I'd be absolutely astonished if there are any like Americans there.
Right. Hey, look, there are 3 Americans in here. All right. All right. I'm gonna put out a couple of picks. So I always do a board game pick. The one that I've been playing lately is Legendary, Marvel Legendary. I've picked it before, but the other day we were playing with one of the we have like 6 or 7 of the expansions. And the one that we were playing was the World War Hulk expansion. And so Legendary has a board game geek weight of 2.43. So it's, people can pick it up not terribly outside the range of, what you'd expect from a competitive game. The World War Hulk expansion has a board game geek weight of 2.33. So it's slightly less complicated than regular Legendary. And yeah, I mean, it's comic book characters, right? So you have comic book heroes that you recruit, and then you have comic book villains that you're trying to defeat, and they have some scheme that they're trying to accomplish. And so you're playing against the game. And anyway, it's really fun. I really enjoy it. It is a collaborative game, deck building game, and so I'm gonna pick that. A couple of other things that I'm gonna pick really quickly. I don't know if I picked Veet Ruby yesterday. We talked a little bit about Webpacker here, but I've been using Veet Ruby, and I'm liking it. Is it blasphemy to say that I like it better than import maps and prop shaft? Anyway,
No, it's not really. I haven't used Veet, but I mean import maps and ES, but they're all quite frustrating. So I wouldn't be surprised if
yeah.
there's a tool that does something better than them.
Yeah, Veet is like magic, and I get the hot module reloading that I want and everything else out of it. So I'm pretty happy with it, and the setup wasn't heinous. So I'm going to pick that. I'm also going to pick another gem. It's standard RB, which is I think it's built on top of RuboCop, but it essentially just does your linting on your Ruby, and it just follows a set. Like, you can't configure it. It just gives you your linting, which honestly, I don't want to make those decisions. Right. So I've been pretty happy with that as well. And then, I guess the last pick is just Ruby Geniuses. Go check it out, rubygeniuses.com. Still kind of bolting some of the pieces together, but if you want to get together with other Rubyists and see what they're doing and see what's happening and get trained by people you know, then definitely check it out. Yeah, those are my picks. This is awesome, Ayush.
Yeah, thanks for letting me ramble on again. That's 2 weeks in a row now. It's just been me talking.
That's all good.
We got to break you in, you know?
Yeah. It's trial by fire going on. But yeah, it's good fun. It's just good to talk about Bridgetown, because honestly, I think I find it a bit sad how few people in the Ruby community are even aware that it exists. So it's good to chat about it.
All right. Well, till next time, folks, Max out.